And we are live. That one took me by surprise. Welcome, everybody, to another SGGQA podcast. The SGG stands for Some Gadget Guy. That's me, Juan Bagnell. This is the QA podcast where I answer questions and talk about the amazing viewer comments that I get on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Juan Bagnell. Amazing discussions on tech videos and reviews and lifestyle videos, and now this whole vlog series. And that's where I can kind of give back to the community, also share with the community that is providing me all of this amazing, wonderful discussion and content. And we got a really jam-packed show for you today. We took a week hiatus because I wanted to spend some time Thanksgiving, spending time with my family and with my new daughter and with my with her grandparents, and she got to meet her great grandmother. Just some amazing memories being made, and really felt like I couldn't dedicate all that time to shoving food in my face and doing the podcast. So we took a week off. I'm really glad you all came back. Check out this week's show. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. We should jump into holidays today. We're smack dab in the middle of holiday season. We just had Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa right around the corner. And so today is a bunch of fun stuff. Today is Extraordinary Work Team Recognition Day. So this is where you recognize teamwork, but not just any teamwork, extraordinary teamwork. Today is Faux Fur Day. So if you are against the practice of wearing fur, this is the day that you would wear faux fur. And today is International Sweater Festival. And like a sweater vest. So it's a sweater vest festival. It's a festival for sweater vests. That's really tricky there. I like that. That's really clever. Today is National Dice Day. Today is the day that you celebrate your D20s out there. Today's National Kitten Day, and I'm deathly allergic to cats, so I will not be celebrating National Kitten Day. Today is Santa's List Day, and so hopefully you are on Santa's list and not Krampus's list, I guess is what they're celebrating today. Today is also Wear Brown Shoes Day, which I am actually wearing my hiking boots, so these are brown shoes, and I am celebrating Wear Brown Shoes Day. I'm not really that flexible anymore. Hopefully that move and kicking my foot up that high, it doesn't come back to bite me in the ass. And last but not least, certainly not least, is the internet has been abuzz over National Cookie Day. And today is the day that you will celebrate by eating a tasty cookie. As soon as I am done with this podcast, I am going to go out and buy myself a tasty and delicious cookie. And speaking of food stuff, I sent out a challenge. I have to organize my folders here so that I can actually get to this stuff so you can see it. You had a call to action 2 weeks ago, and that was to share some food photos. And I got a couple really good ones. I'm going to start off with my own because I'm narcissistic like that, and it's what I like to do. And so, again, it's Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is actually my favorite holiday of the year. It's the day that I feel a lot less pressure is being put on. Did I buy someone the right gift? For my family, it's really days of preparation and cooking in the kitchen. This is the turkey that my dad made. He always smokes a turkey, which is friggin' delicious. And then this is the turkey that my mom made, where we actually do throw in some of the stuffing and stuff. So this was the oven turkey and was brined and seasoned, and both turkeys were phenomenal. But of course, it's just crazy eating in my household for Thanksgiving. And this is the dish I prepared. It's a baked corn and broccoli. Now, this is like a creamed corn with a broccoli and a little bit of egg, and you mix it all together and you top it with breadcrumbs. And so this year, we really wanted to try and cook everything. Most years, we try and cook everything as fresh as we possibly can. So I even spent time making my own creamed corn. And it was a really fun experience sort of tweaking this dish to make it a little bit healthier. My dad's mashed potatoes are always off the hook. These were finished off in the smoker, so they had this nice, this double baked, crusty skin on top. And then my mom made some savory sweet potatoes. I know that sounds kind of funny, savory sweet, but they worked really well. They were creamy, but then had like rosemary and some spiciness to them. They were really, really, really tasty. So the turkey, after it was all carved up, and so it's just, looking juicy and succulent. We had a bunch of different stuffings. So we had a wild rice stuffing and then a traditional sort of breadcrumb stuffing. But this was made from an herbed bread and a sourdough bread that my parents made days before Thanksgiving so they could let the breads dry out, become giant, like crusty crackery things. And then my sister made an incredible bourbon pecan pie where you could kind of taste the bourbon a little bit. It was really, really good. And this is what the whole plate put together looked like. with some green beans and the corn and broccoli and the stuffings and the turkey and the mashed potatoes. And I ate way too much food, as you're supposed to on Thanksgiving. But even my daughter Lex got in on the action with some milk, some boob juice, and she this is her going into basically a milk coma on Thanksgiving. See her eyes, the 1,000-yard stare of being a well-fed baby. So those were my Thanksgiving photos. I got oh no, did I lose one of the photos? I did. Oh no, I'm gonna have to. So this is from Anthony Bolter. And so Anthony Bolter sent in this photo of his wife's sausage rolls, and I clicked out of screen share. So I'm going to go back into screen share. And so those just looked incredible and delicious. And now I need to find, because someone else showed off their plate, and I think I might have lost it. And that would be really sad because, oh, here it is, Mike L. Beard. Mike L. Beard showed off his plate: white rice, okra, bumbo, mac and cheese, turkey and cranberry sauce. It went down for sure. So full, I got to roll everywhere for a while. Hashtag Thanksgiving Good Food Throwdown and SGGQA. And thanks, Mike Beard, for sharing that, because that looks like a comforting, soul food, delicious style Thanksgiving that I just think, for these types of holidays, it's everything I can say. Like, I just hope my viewers out there are safe, warm, well fed, and spending time with people that they care about. But then I also got a funny meal photo from Sam, my buddy Sam, and not your conventional Thanksgiving photo, but he thinks he interrupted this praying mantis's lunch. So this was a Thanksgiving meal from Samuel Ventiglia. I can't. I'm always going to mispronounce his last name, but Sam sent in this great praying mantis photo taken with his phone. And so, folks, I got a number of really fun food photos from y'all out there. Some really good stuff out there. I was really happy to see people celebrating because, like I said, Thanksgiving is my absolute favorite. And we're going to be having a few more photo challenges like that, so you guys can get your own photos featured on this podcast. But we should probably get into the show proper now that we've gone through holidays and the food picks. That was your call to action. It's with a heavy heart, and this is going to be a really sort of changing gears here pretty hard. But it's with a heavy heart that our family this week had to say goodbye to our beloved pet, Biggelow the Shar Pei. And he was almost 13 years old. And so we were already sort of on borrowed time with him. Shar Peis are not very long-lived dogs, but he was our best friend and companion, and just a cantankerous ball of wrinkles and attitude. And if you know anything about Shar Peis, they're very aloof animals. They're very proud animals, and they don't warm up very quickly to new people. And he was sort of every beautiful characteristic of that, where if he met you at first, he would probably bark at you and then try and pee on you. And then if you still stuck around and you were cool with his owners, then he would become your best friend and he would become a part of your pack. And he passed quietly in his sleep at the beginning of this week. And it's just been an amazing emotional roller coaster of feelings. One, going through this joy of bringing our daughter into the world and experiencing her first Thanksgiving, and just trying to handle baby stuff, and then at the same time being on the opposite end of doggy hospice care as we were watching our pet start to fade. And just knowing that for the first month of her life that Lex had an amazing furry big brother that was it was an amazing part of our household. He worked an incredible amount of overtime while my wife and I planned how we were going to have a child, and he never abandoned his post. And he stayed with us until he knew his replacement was available. And once she checked in, he knew his shift was over and it was time for him to check out. So there is no fitting tribute that I can provide for my dog, because he was an amazing little creature. And as we go through this holiday season, and as you're spending time with family and as you're spending time with friends, first of all, it's just to cherish those moments. We get so caught up in preserving memories. I'm sitting here with my phone and I'm taking photos and videos of everything. And I did that a lot with Biggelow. He's probably one of the most photographed dogs the world has ever seen. And for a very, very short period of time, if you typed in Biggelow, he was one of the top 3 uh, searches on Google. I had shared so many photos of him on services like Flickr that I think for even a couple days he outranked Biggelow T. If you searched for Biggelow and you found this picture of a Shar Pei, that was my dog. And so I'm going back through and I'm looking at all these photos of him, and there are two things that keep just hammering me in the brain. And one of them is I'm terrified about losing these photos now. I don't have the best memory. And from moving around a lot as a kid, a lot of memories get jumbled up and there's some blurriness from some aspects of my childhood. And I'm just desperate to not let that happen to my dog. So I'm going through and I'm terrified, like if a hard drive crashes or if two hard drives crash or if three hard drives crash and I don't have a cloud backup solution, how am I going to make sure that I keep all of these photos of my dog? Because I want to remember Biggelow and I want to hold on to that. And so, I've talked a lot about on this podcast the technology side of that and making sure that we've got good solutions in place, make sure you've got good backup solutions, make sure you're using the cloud or a cloud service that works for your style of data. And so I'm going through and I'm terrified because now I'm looking at this through the eyes of how do I preserve the memories that I'm creating for my daughter? When Biggelow was a little puppy, it was a big deal if we had digital cameras and we could shoot little snippets of video from webcams and stuff like that. And now I'm looking at my daughter, like the amount of information I'm going to be creating to document my daughter's, growth is going to be insane. High quality UHD video and 16 to 20 to 40 megapixel stills. And this is going to follow her throughout her entire life as we're generating so much content just for us. It's stuff that's never going to be seen by anyone else, but we want to hold on to that. And at the same time, I'm sitting down and I'm thinking about how we spent Thanksgiving with my family and the wonderful years that we got to spend with my dog. And I'm going through those photos and I'm kind of kicking myself because I took it upon myself to be like this archivist, this photographer, this documentarian of what was happening. And I don't know that I was always there to be in the moment experiencing that memory. That I took it upon myself to capture this moment, and I wasn't a part of that moment. And there are photos I'm looking through from my dog from 10 years ago. And like, I don't even remember what it was that we were doing. I just remembered that in the moment, it was super important for me to pick up a camera, but I don't remember why. And I don't remember what it was that made me want to pick up the camera. So that was sort of a wasted opportunity. I generated this digital thing, and I'm glad I have it. I'm glad I have the wacky photo of Biggs licking his nose, or my wife straddling, wrestling with the dog on the bed, and she gets him in a leg lock. But I don't really tangibly have that memory anymore. It's almost like my brain went, well, you picked up a camera and you hit the shutter, so now I don't really need to hold on to this. And it kind of disappeared. It kind of evaporated. And that's the kind of stuff I'm even more terrified in generating all of this digital content, that maybe I'm not really preserving memories. Maybe I'm not really holding on to this stuff. I'm just creating junk. And that's some really heady stuff. I mean, getting into the holidays, I know the holidays can be sort of depressing for a lot of people, and I'm going to try and not make this podcast as much of a Debbie Downer as the last podcast was. But it's just something to think about. And I guess I'm throwing the question out to my viewers, especially for in the comments and stuff, is how do you find that balance? And not to say like you need to have like a good answer for that, but even just as a question for you guys to think about on yourself is on your own is how do you find that balance? Preserving a memory and actually partaking in the memory. Because it's always been my job, and now I'm a little upset that it's always been my job. It's I don't know. It's kind of a mess. So what do you guys do about it? How do you guys deal with it? I'd be really interested to hear how you all out there sort of put that together and how you all manage, experiencing life and preserving memories. So that's Biggelow the Shar Pei. There are tons of photos of him on Instagram. I don't know, give him a look, give him a like. He was a funky, cool, twitchy, cantankerous dog, and I'm gonna miss him a lot. I don't know. He passed a couple days ago, And this is the first day I've woken up without my face feeling like I've been punched in the face from crying over it. So it's been kind of rough stuff. So let's move on to some happier stuff then. Getting into actual comments and questions and things that you guys have been talking about. The nice thing about the holidays is a lot of news is kind of cooling off, and so we're getting ready for CES. My inbox has been blowing up over CES invites and what are you going to do for CES and where are you going to be staying and do you want to do a booth tour and that's some really cool stuff coming down the pipe. But we still need to wrap up 2015. So I got this really great product in from a company called Merge VR. And the review on this just went live yesterday or the day before, and this is Merge VR's VR goggles. I'm gonna kind of hold them up here. Really funky, cool purple and black bands, adjustable earpieces, and made out of a really high quality, squishy, foamy material. Very easy to clean too, which is nice because I kind of sweat a lot. And I posted the review, and I got almost the same day I posted the review, I got a comment from the Great Monkey. Do the headphones cut out the crunch of the popcorn, or does it still transfer through bone conduction? Because there's nothing worse than having to stop snacking in order to hear your shows. And I just want to send a big thank you to the Great Monkey for kind of calling me on what was possibly one of the grossest things I've ever shot on this channel ever, in that I open mouth chewed a whole bunch of popcorn and showing what these things look like while you're using them. And that is disgusting of me. I suffer from misophonia, and I couldn't help throwing that in there as a gag in how awful it is when people chew with their mouths open. So you can check out the review. Just don't stick around for the end of the review. But these things are actually pretty cool. And just another sort of step in legitimizing VR technology and also making sure we can get this stuff in consumers' hands. We're all waiting for the high quality stuff, the Oculuses, the Vives, the Razors, all those companies that are going to be making really, really cool high end VR gear. But until then, we've got these great Google Cardboard compatible options that use your phones as the display and the brain and the guts. And so I think that's actually going to be a really interesting consumer place where people are going to start taking advantage of more virtual reality content. So I also got this is a little bit of a longer comment, but a great question from Aniko Martin. And Aniko writes, "Hello, Juan. I want to talk about a personal experience of mine in a smartphone store. It began when I stepped into a local store in my city and I asked the attendant about the Sony Xperia Z5 premium screen. The question is, does the phone run at 4K all the time? The Sony Z5 is going to be the first phone with a 4K screen. A lot of our phones are 2K, 2560 by 1440, and Sony made a big deal about having an even higher resolution screen. And the attendant said with quite some self confidence that yes, the phone runs 4K all the time, not only in photos and video playback, which contradicts the info that I knew beforehand. I admit I'm quite the rascal, as I have a habit of always testing the store attendant's knowledge, even though I'd already know the answer. And I don't know, but in my place, that they always get it wrong up to a point. In California, do you ever encounter experiences like mine? Or is it just in my place that these things happen? And by the way, why haven't you gotten the Z5 Premium yet? Haha, just curious to see your take on that phone. So, well, first of all, thank you for sharing that experience, Nico, because I kind of do a little of that myself. You know, you want to have a conversation, you want to experience these things, you want to play with them before you want to try before you buy. You want to play with them, you want to get your hands on them, you want to see like what is this thing all about. And I find that in this digital economy where a lot of us are going to be shopping through websites, through Amazon, through eBay, through carrier websites, if we're going to be signing up for a contract, it can be a little dicey to actually get out to a physical location and play with something, especially knowing that a lot of us probably aren't going to buy from that location unless we get some kind of amazing service. I know a lot of people were probably looking at shopping through carrier. I mean, I think that's why carrier stores are becoming little mini Best Buys, right? Not only do you walk in the door and you can play with the phone, you can see a phone displayed, and it's not just the plastic empty shell dummy phone anymore. It's an actual like working thing that you can play with, even though they're usually abused to the point where you can't get a great idea of how they work. But you can that's one of the reasons why they're still attractive to go into a carrier store and do that. So okay, I've at least held this phone, I've kind of played with this phone, I'm in better shape for maybe potentially buying this or another phone. And then they're doing a much better job of actually stocking accessories. So when you walk out the door, you can actually outfit it. You can get a case, you can get speakers, you can get a headphones, you can get all that stuff. But I still find that there's this there's this lack of education. I think one, it's really difficult at the store level to keep up with all of the changes in technology. You kind of just keep up with what those companies will keep in stock. And so then you run into people that maybe they are fans of tech, but they've been working at a Best Buy or like a Fry's Electronics or someplace like that for a while. And, it's kind of easy to fall behind just what's going on, what's new, what's hip, what's bleeding edge. And so I've become a little less, antagonistic in my older age. Whenever I encounter people at stores, but more often than not, I will just try to not engage with them at all. Chances are pretty good that I know why I'm there and I know what it is that I want to take a look at. And they're probably not going to be able to help me with the questions that I have. And it's often because of those experiences, Aniko, like what you just documented. Like, I want to know, does this phone, upscale a lower resolution for the UI and then display 4K for photos and videos? Or does it actually render the Android UI at 4K all the time? Now, if you're watching this podcast, there's a pretty good chance that you already know the answer to that kind of question for the tech things that you care about, or you're at least sort of, smarter than the average bear and being able to look that kind of stuff up on your own. Um, I'm not sure that any companies in this day and age are really investing in the time and education and the talent to have people working for them that can really be on the ball for answering those kinds of questions, because the majority of consumers probably aren't asking those kinds of questions. And that's a little disappointing. It's the same thing we talk about with other phones, like when you look at Samsung's current strategy on smartphones, and they're probably designing it by statistics. It's okay if we remove an SD card slot because 73% of Galaxy owners never put in a memory card. And you're like, well, that's not really okay. You're not pissing off a majority of your consumers, but you're pissing off the most vocal. The 73% of people who cared enough to put a memory card into their phone are gonna complain about that. So, when I walk into a store and I'm trying to get information on things, it's usually not pretty, and I'm just more likely to turn to Google or something like that. But I think those kinds of experiences are pretty universal. I think most people watching this right now have had some kind of run-in with a very self-assured sales rep at like a local, electronics shop who absolutely was wrong. And so I guess, I wonder how people handle that. Do you engage and do you try and tell them that they're wrong, or do you back off and walk away? The last time I actually got into it with a Best Buy, a blue shirt at Best Buy, I was trying to look up stuff on computer monitors. I was looking at the different resolutions and the different screen panels, and I asked, hey, do you guys have any different types of, because they all had TN panels, and do you have any like professional grade monitors, because I need to do color grading. And the guy's like, oh, well, this one's the best. And it was just another sort of gaming high frame rate. It's like, oh, I don't care about frame rate. What I care about is color accuracy. And he's like, oh, well, this one's the best because it's color gamut and the TN panel and super fast refresh. So your eyes will be able to perceive stuff better. And like, okay, well, I just got to walk away from this guy. But as I'm walking away from that guy, there are two people that are, it's a mother and a son, and they're shopping for him to go to college, and they're trying to get trying to figure out, hey, when I go from a 22-inch monitor to a 23-inch monitor, there's this huge price jump. I wonder why that is. And so I go in there and I tell, like, oh, well, if you look at these numbers here, you'll see the resolution jumps quite a bit, and if you can, you might want to try and afford this more expensive monitor, but it's because of this. And if you're doing certain types of work, you'll be able to do documents side by side, and that's why, though. But you can look at those numbers to say, why is it that some monitors are more expensive than others? And you guys have a great day. And it was this really great sort of back and forth moment where I know for a fact, had they gotten the guy that was trying to help me, they never would have gotten a good answer to that question. He probably would have gone off again on, well, the refresh rate and the sync and the color gamut for your gaming is going to be faster for your eyes, and that's. But I mean, if you just want to get the cheaper one, it's fine because it'll do the things and the stuff with the tech and it'll be great. Completely ignoring the actual question that they were asking, just to sort of vomit out the planned the planned speech that he had on why some monitors were better than others. So yeah, Aniko, I think that's kind of a universal experience for a lot of us geeks. Is we end up running into situations where we probably do know more. I look at it like my grandfather's generation, because he worked on cars as like his passion, as his hobby, and I'm sure if he ever like went into like an AutoZone to go buy parts or something like that, if anyone ever tried to help him, he would have been very dismissive of the help that they would have provided for his unique experience and his unique problems. So, but to answer the other part of your question is, what have I gotten? Why haven't I gotten the Z5 Premium? And this is kind of sad because I really want to support other manufacturers. I know we get caught up here, especially here in the United States. I know we get caught up a lot on like Apple and Samsung. And then there are like these other little players like HTC and Motorola and LG. And then there's like a whole other wide world of Huawei's and Sony's and Xiaomi's and other companies that are building out smartphones, and they seem to be very popular in other areas of the world. And Sony for me has become a company that is very much like Nokia was before the Microsoft buyout. And I look at Sony, they don't seem to want to play ball with American carriers, and I can't really blame them for that. But their response to American carriers has basically been to kind of walk away from the entire North American market. The types of devices that they sort of dribble out to North America, to United States at least. I can't speak for Canada. But the types of devices that they dribble out to our markets are usually way behind, way old. It's very hard to get information on what carriers, what bands are going to support. And it's just not fun doing business with a company like that. It's why I stopped being a Nokia fan after my first Nokia candy bar. I never really got into. I mean, I loved Nokia smartphones, but I never really owned one for a long period of time because I never knew how well it was going to be supported, how well it would work in the United States. And at the time we had Blackberries and Windows mobile phones, and I kind of just veered off into that territory instead. And I kind of think Sony's done the same thing. They make beautiful looking hardware. They are class leading camera manufacturers. So you would expect the camera experience would be pretty good. We know that those Sony sensors are going to end up in a bunch of different phones, but they don't seem to want to play ball with us. And it's kind of hard for me to throw my own money at a product. Like I don't go out and buy the Nexus. I'm not a Nexus guy. And I don't think I'm going to use a Sony as a daily driver. And I don't feel like I want to support a company that's not going to properly support my country. It's hard for me to talk about that product, even delivering my bias on that product. It's hard for me to approach that with any kind of objectivity because I'm already kind of cranky about it. And so I've reached out to Sony PR and I've showed them my camera reviews and my audio reviews and the way that I style editorial. And I get positive feedback like, oh yeah, that seems really cool. And then like you try and have that other step in the conversation. We're like, hey, can you loan me one for 2 weeks so that we can run it through these tests and you can be represented on this channel? And then they see that I'm in the United States and they don't really seem to have any interest in playing ball with that, which is disappointing because only 40% of my audience is in North America. 60% of my audience lives outside of North America. But even with those kinds of numbers, Sony doesn't really seem interested in supporting a smaller producer like me. I hope that changes. My goal for this next year, for 2016, is to build this channel up to a point where I can splurge a little more on some of these other products for reviews and stuff like that. We'll see how well that goes. The channel's been showing great growth, so I'm hoping that that'll continue. But it's always dicey for me when I'm looking at raising a daughter, contributing to the household finances, and then also experimenting with how I'm going to produce content for this channel. So moving out of smartphones that we can't buy here in the United States. Ugh, man, voice is raw. I got a couple camera questions, which I think is always, I'm always going to have a fun time answering camera questions. And it's always interesting to me where these comments come from because my videos seem to live for a really long time. And so this is another question that comes from the DSLR versus phone comparison that I did back when the G4 launched. And I get really cranky about how we position this conversation when people try and talk about smartphones replacing mirrorless cameras, interchangeable lens cameras. But I got this question from Rohan Montiero, and this one was kind of interesting. It was a nice little what if. And Rohan writes, from what I understand, phone manufacturers cannot increase the size of the sensor without impacting the size of the phone, which makes sense. But what if, hypothetically, the next generation phone has an aperture of f1.2? Would something like that possibly compensate for the smaller sensor and make it a more even fight when discussing aspects like depth of field and low light sensitivity? Rohan, that is a great question. So the short answer to that is yes, having a wider aperture absolutely would make an impact on how much light can make it through the hole in the lens onto the image sensor, and then also the wider the aperture, the more shallow the depth of field is, the better the background will blur behind your subject. So part of the problem with that though is to open the aperture wider, it means you need more high quality glass. So look at the difference. You can Google this. If you look at the difference between an f1.8 lens and an f1.2 lens from a camera manufacturer like Nikon or Canon, the f1.8 lens is dramatically smaller than the f1.2. And that's because when you open that aperture, it's not that you just build the lens out to the very edges of that aperture, it's that you actually need more glass than the aperture. So you need to make a much bigger front lens piece. Now, I don't think that you would need to make a bigger lens for a wider aperture than you would to include a larger sensor, but you'd still have a compromise there. You'd still need to build in a bigger module to improve upon the amount of glass that we have on these half-inch sensors. So that's one aspect of it. But two, because our phones don't have variable apertures, because they can't change how big or how small that hole is on the back of your phone, I don't know that an f1.2 aperture would be appropriate for all shooting scenarios. I mean, there is something to be said for the fact that because our phones have such small sensors, and even at f2, that's still a pretty long depth of field. You can still see a lot behind your subject when you're focusing from a medium distance. I don't know that we'd always want to lose that. So if I focused on someone's face with an f1.2 aperture, and I'm within a couple feet of their face, so I'm trying to focus up really, really close, I will lose a lot more of the background, and there are plenty of situations where I kind of bank on the idea like, "Oh, I'm still gonna get a sense of what's going on." Maybe I'm at, like, an amusement park. You wanna see a roller coaster in the background. You know, if we don't have some kind of control over that experience and we don't have a long enough depth of field to inform where that person is, then it's a little trickier to use that camera, and I'm speaking very generally because we don't obviously have a smartphone with an f1.2 aperture. But I could see where potentially you could run into problems by having something that wide on a phone sensor that small. And so, really, I think, until we can flirt with more experiments like the Nokia Lumia 1020, which had a 2/3 inch sensor, or the Panasonic that had a 1 inch sensor, and it was sort of more of a camera that then had an Android phone stapled to the back of it, until we can flirt with some more experiments like that, I think the half-inch sensor is gonna rule the roost. I think it's gonna be a while before that gets unseated, but I hope it does, or I hope we find other ways to do things like maybe include a variable aperture, because then I think we would have a little bit more flexibility over how we were shooting and composing for our mobile photography and video. So thank you for sending in that question, Rohan. And then I also got kind of another tech photography tech question from Wilmer Rodriguez. And this one is all about video and what he can do with video. And so this was on my iPhone 6s camera review. So we reviewed the camera on the iPhone 6s. And Wilmer writes, I have a question regarding 4K at 30 frames per second versus 1080p at 60 frames per second. I'm going to be recording in a slightly dim light setting similar to the garage in this video. And when I'm reviewing my cameras, I do a lot of like exposure. So you can see how the camera will change exposure as lighting conditions change. And I do this one shot. It's a really gross looking shot in my garage, but it's so that you can see when I'm in the darkest part of my garage and move to the outside bright light, how does the phone change that lighting? But the garage is actually a pretty dim. It's kind of a low light. And it's funny, we think about our homes being these easy to navigate, easy to see around places, but we keep our homes pretty dark because that's a more comfortable, cozy environment. And so when you're trying to shoot photos and videos indoors like that, it can be really tricky. But anyway, so Wilma writes, I plan on capturing quality pictures within the video. However, I've heard that you should use 1080p at 60 frames per second in dim light. But like I said, I prefer quality videos. What should I use in the end? So this is something that I think has been really we we gloss over the actual physics because we want to deliver information in a really easily digestible way. So we say things like, oh, well, if you want to shoot better video, maybe you should shoot 60 frames per second, 1080p. But that doesn't address all situations. And so, first of all, we can address this very easily with just a little bit of math, a very little bit of math. So the amount of time you hold open a shutter, like we're talking about a still photo, the amount of time you open a shutter is how much light is going to hit the sensor. The longer you hold open that shutter, the brighter your image will be. The shorter you hold open that shutter, the darker your image will be. The faster the shutter is, the better it is at freezing movement, but it's also letting less light in on the sensor. The same is true of video. So with video, we have two things at play: the number of frames per second and the shutter speed per frame. So if our 30 frame per second video, if we're shooting video at 30 frames per second, that means each frame is a maximum of 1/30th of a second for the shutter speed. That means each frame, the maximum time you can hold open that frame is 1/30th of a second because you need to shoot 30 frames in a second. If we move to 60 frames per second video, that means the maximum time we can hold open each individual frame is 1/60th of a second. You can't hold a shutter open for 1/30th of a second and still have time to put in 60 frames of video in that 1 second. So if we cut the shutter speed in half, we make the shutter speed twice as fast, and we don't change anything else, we don't change the ISO or the white balance, any other settings, that means half as much light will hit the sensor in 60 frame per second video as it does in 30 frames per second video, which means your photo is only going to be half as bright. And this has actually been a big problem. You can search the forums from the iPhone 6 where people not understanding that concept complain about how dim and how dark iPhone video is at night. And one of the reasons why is I think a lot of them are trying to shoot this higher quality video, but they're shooting 60 frame per second video. And we know that the iPhone has a pretty aggressive cap on how high the ISO will go. So if you're shooting 60 frame per second video and the iPhone is capping the ISO because they don't want the video to be too grainy, you're going to run into those limits of physics and your video is going to be super dim or dark. Then the other thing that you bring up, Wilmer, is that you say you want to capture photos within your video. And so for me, everything that you're saying, you're going to be shooting in lower light conditions and you want to be able to pull still frames. The iPhone shooting UHD video means you're going to be shooting at 30 frames per second, which means you're going to be letting in more light per frame. And then you have 4 times the resolution to play with each individual frame while you're shooting UHD. So I just think it's a win-win. Shoot UHD, shoot that 4K video at 30 frames per second. Your images are going to be brighter and you'll have more resolution to play with for individual stills. So you'll actually have decent photos. So if you shoot 1080p, that's a 2 megapixel picture that you'll get. How impressive is a 2 megapixel image in this day and age? It's not very impressive. When you shoot 4K, that's 4 times more resolution. So you're going to be shooting an 8 megapixel image that you can actually even print from. I mean, that's what's impressive about how much higher this resolution is when we're shooting that kind of video. So Wilmer, that would be my recommendation. Obviously, I would say you want to play with both. And then if you're shooting in kind of dimmer situations, I would also highly recommend looking at what other options you might have for increasing the amount of light. So maybe you're shooting with someone else's flashlight. They've got their phone LED pointing at your subject too. Anything you can do to increase the light is going to improve the quality of your photos and videos. The better the light you have, the better your media and content will be. And so this is one of the things I'm going to take a little break here in the middle of this video because we've just talked about some camera stuff and I'm really excited to share with you guys. I've been teasing this for a little while and it's about time I took the wraps off of it proper. That in talking about camera stuff, I have written a book on smartphone photography. And we address a lot of concepts like what we just discussed here for Wilmer in how you can improve your photos from your smartphones, how you can improve your videos from your smartphones, accessories that you can use with your smartphones, editing apps and software you can use to improve your content, and that this isn't a book on technology. This is a book on photography and composition. So it's going to be full of tips and tricks for, how you line up a shot, how you follow the rule of thirds, how you break the rule of thirds, how you can draw inspiration from classical art and paintings, and then also how I've got a whole series of exercises that actually helped me when I was shooting with my first DSLR, and how these exercises actually transfer really well into the age of smartphone photography. So, folks, I'm going to go back into screen share here because this is the cover of the book. The name of the book is going to be Take Better Photos, Smartphone Photography for Noobs by Juan Carlos Bagnell. That's me. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell. I'm super excited to be sharing this with you guys. Like I said, this is going to be with a little bit more of a beginner's focus, but we want to introduce some pretty some intermediate and advanced photography concepts for people to really improve their media, their content, their production, whatever it is that they're trying to do. If you just want to take better family photos or photos of your kids, we can help you take a step up. If you actually want to start trying to create art projects with your smartphone camera, we can also have a conversation about that too. And this book is going to help address all of that usage, all of that behavior, and a lot of the philosophy that goes into creation. We live in a day and age where I don't think it's unreasonable anymore that the only camera someone might own is the camera that's bolted onto the back of their phones. Obviously, I shoot with a variety of different action cameras and DSLRs and mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras because I have very specific needs for why I might need a tool like that. But the all-rounder tool for most people that's going to tackle most of what they need to do on a daily basis is the one that's already in their pocket. They're great imaging tools now, and so we can talk about how you can improve your education and change your behavior to really maximize the quality of the content that you can get from that. So I've finished the book. The manuscript's done. The photos are all embedded in the book, and it's going up to Amazon as we speak. And by the end of next week, I think it'll be live. Obviously, I'm going to have more videos and blog posts and stuff talking about it, but it'll be available to purchase on the Kindle system first. I am going to do a Kindle distribution first, and then it'll go to iTunes and Google Play Books and anywhere else that I can hawk this thing. So I'm really excited to be sharing that with you guys. And for a lot of you who have been asking me for more tutorials or for more tips and tricks, we're going to be doing a lot of work back and forth between the book and then the videos that I'm producing around the smartphone cameras that I review. And so even in the book, I'm linking to videos that help demonstrate concepts. If we want to talk about how to blur the background in a photo without using apps, I've got a video on that that's referenced through the book. You can click on a link in the ebook, and then that's going to take you to the video. It's really cool how we can kind of mix this content now. And it's just going hand in hand with producing a better product for you guys too, which is really exciting. So that's the name of the book, Take Better Photos, Smartphone Photography for Noobs. And it should be out the end of next week, just in time for holiday shopping to help you get a leg up on Christmas and Hanukkah photos. Make sure that you are getting the most out of your new smartphone purchase. If you buy a new phone for yourself or for a family member, maybe this could be a nice little add-on gift. I'm just saying, if you have that wannabe Ansel Adams or that wannabe high professional photographer from their phones, that this could be the kind of solution for them. So definitely be on the lookout for that, because I'm super stoked that it's finally done and it's going to be real and it's going to be out there. It's super cool stuff. So I hope you guys check it out and I hope you guys like it. So I just want to check the Q&A real quick. From Gabe Lasky. Gabe writes, I was in a Verizon store with one employee working that told me only Apple and HTC sold unlocked phones, and I would not be able to get a SIM for my Nexus 6 because it was locked. And he said he bought that from the Google store, by the way. See, that's exactly that kind of assuredness. You know what I mean? When someone is really confident in their ignorance, how do you fight that? How do you deal with that idea? How do you get around that assertion? I've got a dogmatic knowledge of something that's wrong. And that's absolutely why I see so many people fighting on the internet. Someone is wrong on the internet and I'm going to correct them. James Camille writes, which frames per second is more immersive in your opinion? 24, 30, 60, or 120? So, immersiveness is a really tricky concept to discuss. And I'm going to fall back on my stock answer on which is the best frames per second. I feel most video projects need to focus on what it is that they're trying to accomplish. So, if you have a video and the video that you're trying to accomplish is detailed and lush and scenic, then I would say, maybe scaling back to a 24 or 30 frame per second frame rate, but then making sure that you've got the resolution to back it up. That's a situation where I think shooting UHD at 30 or 24 frames per second makes more sense to me. However, if you're trying to capture action, if you're trying to capture objects moving, athletes, race cars, bicycles, whatever it might be, that's when I think we really need to start examining high frame rate. I know a lot of people complain about, 48 frame per second movie theater video and 60 frame per second consumer video looking crappy like video. But when you can see the fluidness of the action, you start getting used to a native 60 frame per second video being displayed at 60 frames per second. There isn't anything that captures movement like that. And it really does help inform what the movement of that scene feels like. When we look at 24 frame per second film, and we're capturing movement at 24 frames per second, our brains naturally interpret movement based on how those individual frames are blurring from frame to frame. There's a 24th of a second. I mean, obviously they have faster shutter speeds. You can look at Gladiator, the Russell Crowe movie. Someone who's really over cranking the shutter, even though it's only 24 frame per second film. Very aggressive look. It's buzzy and jittery and everything's sharp edged. Well, that's what I kind of feel we need to move towards for action now in this day and age with 60 frame per second video. And so I find that to be the more appropriate frame rate is when the focus is, I want to see the action of this thing. And so then I'm even fine if we skip down to a lower resolution. For me, it wasn't that I got all of the little details. It was that I'm capturing the movement as crisp and as clear as possible. So that's kind of where I fall on that frame rate question. With whether or not it's the most immersive, that also has a great deal to do with how it is that you're consuming that video. Because I think if you were to like pop something like this on your head, it wouldn't matter what the frame rate was because you would be completely surrounded by that experience. You wouldn't be able to look away. So that's kind of where I like immersiveness is a little trickier to discuss. And then Stephen Ayers, congratulations on the book one, available at Google ? And sweet, I really wanted it on Kindle. It's going to launch on Kindle. I am going to use their Kindle their Kindle book distribution program, which means it's going to be an exclusive on Amazon through the beginning of next year. And then I'll be able to open it up to Google Play and to iTunes. So it will go to other platforms, but it's going to start on Kindle. And for me, it's just because I feel all of the books that I buy are typically through Amazon because it's cross-platform. And for me, that's why I've just stuck with Amazon. Is it doesn't matter what device I pick up. If I want, I can read my book on a Fire phone or on a BlackBerry. I want to make sure everybody has the ability to kind of get it or to take a crack at it that way. So thank you, by the way. It's I'm really excited for that book to be coming out. So now getting back into a couple more questions before we wrap this puppy up. I got a question. Because I've been putting out videos a little slower. It's been curious, we're wrapping the year up, and I know this is a really hot buying season, not only for people getting gifts, but also for people getting things for themselves. Black Friday and Cyber Mondays, when a lot of people are looking at buying their own phones and maybe signing up for another 2-year contract or, whatever leasing program their carrier might have. And this is the time of year where my versus videos just kind of blow up again. So I got this from Justin, and this is on my G4 versus Note 5 comparison. And hold on, I'm going to take a little sip of water here. And Justin writes, I have been using the LG G4 since it came out, but I also use the Note 5 since it was out. I find that it's a mixed bag with both phones. The S Pen I almost never use. As for the G4, I tested games on both handsets and found the G4 handles graphics intensive games better. I tried San Andreas on both and have a review video to back up what I'm saying. The Note 5 has a hard time with gaming when it comes to graphics heavy games such as San Andreas, Nova 3, and Modern Combat 5. And I ended up giving my Note 5 to a family member because I couldn't play some games on the Note 5. I have a review channel called Just in Tech. Get it? Because his name's Justin. It's pretty tricky. And you can see the gaming issues there with the Note 5. And I test I test the phone with the gaming settings on the max settings. So, Justin, this is one of the really crazy things, and this is why I don't do a lot of benchmarking. But I still am guilty of falling into this trap too of sort of making general assertions about things. My experiences with the Note 5 on the games that I played, things like Riptide and Marvel Future Fight and Sentinel 4, the Note 5 was the smoother gameplay experience than the G4 was. The G4 was fine, but the Note 5 was smoother on all of the games that I played. I think that's really funny is because I think with phones, especially when we look at different chipsets, so what we're talking about is a battle between Samsung's processor and video chip and Qualcomm's processor and graphics chip. And that's kind of like when we get into these really hardcore nerd debates between like AMD graphics cards and NVIDIA graphics cards is some games will run better on AMD hardware and some games will run better on NVIDIA hardware. So it's really hard to balance that commentary because obviously I can't play every app, you know? But I think it's really telling. And this is something that maybe now that you've said this, I want to give it a shot because I've never really played first person shooters from my phone. And so when I'm looking at games like Modern Combat 5 and Nova 3, those are first person shooters. That maybe there's something about how that graphics engine works that just plays ball really well with Qualcomm's hardware. And so now I'm curious. Like now I just want to give it a shot. But from some of the more like tower defense style games and the more like adventure and RPG style games, I found that pulling the camera out a bit, I seem to get better gameplay on the Note 5. So first of all, thank you for sharing that experience because those are games I probably never would have tested on any of my reviews. But now I'm kind of curious to see like maybe I should be mixing it up a bit more. But then also it's just I think it really does speak to our phones are like PCs in that wherever they're built, whoever made all the guts for those devices, we can't have just purely objective, consistent tests that are always going to say, well, absolutely, the Note 5 under all gaming situations is going to outperform the G4. And so I've been a little guilty of that because my big thing has been, that's one of the advantages that Samsung still has over LG. But I need to be careful because I think I say things like the Note 5 is better for gaming than LG is on the games that I play, not on all games. So thanks for bringing that up, Justin. And then I also got another. Oh, I didn't write who it was from. Dang it. I don't know who this comment was from, but thank you for leaving this comment because it's a great question. This is more about me. So I'm going to talk about me here for a second. This person writes, could you tell us how you started on being a tech journalist? Not how you first uploaded a video to YouTube, but how do you first get in this tech community and what makes you interested in this field? And for extra credit, what is your most likable phone feature that you have used and you don't see it in recent flagship phones? So well, in starting the YouTube channel, sort of paralleled very closely the experiences I was having with doing a lot of writing. And I got my start in commercial voiceover of all places. I was working at a talent agency here in Los Angeles, repping some of the best voice actors in the world. The best voice actors in Los Angeles are the top tier voice actors worldwide. This is the market. This is where animation and video games. This is where you source your talent from. And so I was really lucky to get a job at a talent agency out here. And so I was never in the mailroom. I didn't work as an assistant for very long. I went straight into being a booth director and then also being the person responsible for some of the casting. So which actors were picked to audition for projects, that was also on my plate too for some of my tenure at this talent agency. And so being the tech geek that I was, and having a background in college that also exposed me to a lot of recording concepts, actors would naturally ask, like, hey, I want to set up home recording so that I can do auditions from home. And this was prior to the explosion of podcasts. This was almost 10 years ago. And so people would ask me questions and I would try and answer those questions, but then you would start getting the same questions over and over and over again. And so I started a blog. It was someaudioguy.com. The blog still exists, but I haven't updated it in a really long time. It's just there are some articles that I kind of feel that when people search for very basic questions, they'll still pop up. And so the reason why I created this blog was to sort of mitigate the kinds of basic questions that I was getting on a very regular basis about how people could do this. So I started writing more articles. Companies started taking notice of the fact that I was writing about a very unique style of recording. Spoken word recording is sort of the bastard stepchild of recording in general, because when you're talking, you're using microphones in a very different way than when you're singing. And so this was a very unique perspective to be writing about at that time. And so companies would reach out, hey, like, hey, we've got headphones. Do you want to try out our headphones? Or hey, we've got this other USB mic. Do you want to try out this USB mic? Or we've got a mixer that we think your audience would be really interested. Do you want to take it for a spin? And so I would write up my experiences using this gear. And that just sort of naturally expanded into more and more general, from being very hyper focused on not only recording, but spoken word recording in Los Angeles, to recording in general, to music, to consumer electronics. And it just sort of spread to a point where I was doing work with Nokia PR in hanging out, trying out new cell phones, and they would talk about high quality audio. So they would want me to be there to talk about headphones and music and watching movies from your phone. And so it just sort of grew naturally from that. And I would say that was almost a 10-year process where I was working almost exclusively in Hollywood at a talent agency to now where I am very sort of a very flexible individual. I still do a lot of work in documentary filmmaking, in podcasting, and vlogging, consumer electronics. I'm very spread out now, but a lot of that is still built on that back of that early commentary. And so the YouTube channel kind of got started because of that shift. When I started talking in about more general consumer electronics, the best way to be showing these things off was the best way that I had when I was doing recording equipment. You'd want to put up samples. You want to show these things actually being handled and being used. And all of that kind of went hand in hand with just a bigger focus on creating video. And so I was an audio producer. It took me a long time to figure out a style that made sense for me in terms of editing video. And I'm still learning stuff new. Every video I make, every review I shoot, I'm doing something new that I hadn't done before. So apologies again to whoever asked that question, but that's kind of how I came up into being a tech journalist. And so out of that, you build relationships, you build contacts, you're reaching out to people, you're collaborating. And it was a pretty natural evolution to, after meeting a reporter for NBC, to say like, oh yeah, and I've done this and I've talked about that and we can do this. And when you can kind of prove a consistency of production, when you can kind of prove a consistency of output, I am very regularly putting content out that talks about technology and consumer advocacy. It gets really easy to trust that individual will be able to come through. And so I've done a number of spots with NBC4 here in LA, talking about the Apple malware hack, talking about spyware on kids' phones, talking about different cyber threats from Android smartphones. I've done a couple different pieces on cyber threats. And so, it just sort of snowballs. Like I did a great Sirius XM radio interview a couple years ago when GTA 5 came out, talking about violence in media. It sort of grows just in being able to, over time, show that you can build a reputation. And for me, it really was just mostly a component of time. And so that's kind of where Some Gadget Guy came from. And that's why I work as a tech journalist and an editorialist and an advocate. And you find the things that you start really caring about. When I started this channel, I was so hyper focused on audio because of my background in recording. It took me a long time to kind of get my footing on other aspects of consumer electronics. And now in this day and age, I find I'm a much bigger advocate for talking about things like content production from smartphone cameras and from editing and from being able to produce your own content. VR content, I think, is going to be huge as people can create their own really awesome 360-degree immersive experiences. I think that's going to be an amazing opportunity for consumer driven content. And we're only going to be able to expose that to people if we're very aggressive in talking about where these products are, how they can get better, and whether or not it's going to fit into someone's workflow. So we have to treat these things like any other product, like we would a high-end camera, a high-end microphone. We've got to treat these things the same way. So I've got one last question again on one of my versus videos. This is one more, the Note 5 versus the Note 4. And I thought this was a really interesting what do I want to call this? It's an interesting hypothesis that's coming from don't tell me I forgot to write this guy's name down too. I am so mad because this was a great I'm actually going to find this person's name, but I'm going to read his comment first. So the comment is, just a heads up, there will probably never be a Note 6. And remember, this is my Note 4 versus Note 5 comparison. The Note 5 is Samsung's attempt to phase the Note series into the S series. In that regard, the Note 4 might very well be the last true Note phone, and it sure is. Hypothesis, because I think there are a lot of things happening in Samsung land where Samsung is definitely making changes to how they build phones. I think there's a fear that they're becoming a little too iPhone-like and removing things like memory card support. Okay. So this came from Borealis88. Borealis88. Thank you for writing this hypothesis because I think there are so many interesting things happening with Samsung right now. And so we look at the Galaxy S6, S6 Edge Plus, the Note 5, and we can see some sort of lines on where Samsung is building out products built on statistical averages. You know, a majority of people will never swap the battery. It's okay if we build the battery into the phone. A majority of people will never put in a memory card, so it's okay. We're not going to sell the Note 5 in Europe, in England, in places in Australia. I don't know if the Note 5 hasn't made it to Australia because a majority of people don't use the S Pen. I think that's a dangerous way to build out phones, but I understand why they're playing the numbers the way they are. So, my theory for where Samsung might go with the future with the future of their phones is kind of like what Apple's doing. I think I think Samsung is going to follow in Apple's footsteps as it pertains to the iPad Pro, where a future S6 Edge Plus, a future Samsung phablet will just be sold as the phone. And then you can buy a stylus separately. I think that's where we're going to start heading towards. I don't know if we're going to do that with the Note 6, but I think by the time we get to the Note 7, we won't really have notes anymore. We'll have regular sized phone and phablet phone. And if you want a pen, you can buy one separately. And I think that's what's going to happen with Samsung. I hate to say it, Borealis88, but your theory there to me makes a little sense in the direction that Samsung is taking their smartphone line, that's maybe what we might be looking at. Now, what I hope is that they continue to build in those great digitizers. You can use Wacom tablets, Wacom styluses. So I hope that we still have that option. But I think they're looking at the numbers saying, well, most people don't use them, so it's okay if we just stop including it with the product. We'll still build in support for it. I also think we'll probably see a return to the memory card slot. It's rumored to be on the Galaxy S7, but I don't know if what we'll see is a hot swappable memory card. I think what'll happen is to continue using their UFS file system, file storage, that you'll put in a memory card and then it'll be formatted for the phone and it'll just live as phone storage. It'll become a part of the phone, but you won't be able to like pop the card out, put it in a GoPro, pull it from the GoPro, put it in your computer. I don't think you'll be able to do that once the card's been formatted. So that's my theory. And I would love to hear your theories on where Samsung's going. And not only do I want to hear your theories on where Samsung's going and where they might build out a future phablet, I also want to tease that I had one of the reasons why my podcast was a little late today was because I had the absolutely lovely and talented Trisha Hirschberger, who now I don't think my I can't do a screen share. That's so frustrating. I had Trisha Hirschberger in the office to talk about. She's a huge Samsung fan. And I wanted to ask her about her experiences using Samsung products over the last year. You can see her in my Galaxy S6 Active video where we went out to a water park and we tried to abuse the Active at water parks, taking it down water slides and dropping them and taking them underwater and doing underwater selfies and stuff like that. And so I had her in, and that's actually why my office is set up the way it is right now, sort of interview style. And so next week, I'm going to have a video with her sharing her experiences using Samsung and where we think Samsung is going to be going over next year and what their sort of 2015 looked like. So be on the lookout for that video because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And then also, I plugged this podcast a little while ago because I'm just so enamored with it. Uh, a really close friend of mine, his name is Yuri Lowenthal, and he does a show called Cast of Characters on Geek Nation, and he's a phenomenal voice actor. You if you've watched any media, Justice Leagues or Ben 10, he was the voice of Ben 10 for a while. Just a phenomenal actor, and he hosts a show, and he was kind enough to have me on his show. And so in January, I'm going to be on Cast of Characters. We already recorded the episode, but because of their production cycle, it's going to be out after the new year. I think I'm going to be one of the first guests in the new year, but just super honored because they've had incredible performers on there, like Roger Craig Smith and casting directors like Andrea Romano and Ivy Eisenberg. Just if you care about animation, if you care about video games, you like the performers that make these characters come alive. Cast of Characters is an absolutely totally addictive podcast. I would totally recommend checking out. And then, like I said, I'm going to be on there in January. So some really cool stuff to take out. And then Trisha had me on her show recently to talk about headphones. So I'm going to be on Trisha Hirschberger's YouTube channel to talk about headphones and gaming headsets and stuff like that. So again, just some really cool stuff coming out, and not only on this YouTube channel, but around the web. And I think it's on that note, we should probably wrap all this stuff up. First of all, I got to send another shout out to sponsors, lootcrate.com. If you use the promo code SGLOOT, you can save yourself 10% on a super cool subscription box service, all kinds of geek and gamer stuff. I really love the Loot Crate. We just recently did the unboxing for November's crate, which was Combat. And then December's crate is coming out soon, so definitely be on the lookout for that. And audibletrial.com/SGG. You can pick yourself up a free audiobook on me. You don't have to pay for it. Totally free. If you sign up for a free trial and you get this free audiobook and you decide you never want to give Audible any money, you can still keep that audiobook. And it's my gift to you this holiday season. And then I do need to send shout outs to the different places where you can listen to the audio version of the SGGQA podcast. We've got Player FM, we've got Stitcher, we're on iTunes. As soon as Google Play launches their podcast catcher, we're on Google Play already. We've already been approved. And above and beyond, I've got to send the biggest shout out to archive.org. Archive.org is a phenomenal service which is trying to back up the internet. You know, at the beginning of this podcast, I was talking about trying to preserve those memories of my dog, trying to make sure that I have all of my content from my daughter saved in a really safe way. And so that's me. That's on me to find those backup solutions. But archive.org is trying to do that for the internet. You know, all of those amazing articles and videos and music and video and just incredible content that gets put up on the web. And then if a server goes down or if they stop paying for it, that stuff can just evaporate. That stuff can just disappear. I don't think we always we ever realize just how fragile our digital content is. And so archive.org is the service that I've started supporting financially. I don't donate to Wikipedia anymore because I don't like how they run their community. I've been sending all of my donation dollars to Archive. And if you're going to donate to any online organization this year, I would highly recommend checking them out and then just seeing what amazing content they have to offer, because there's phenomenal stuff. Like my absolute favorite zombie film, Night of the Living Dead, you can get a Blu-ray quality rip of that film completely legal on Archive because of how copyright and public domain works. Just a phenomenal resource. So one last check-in just with the live chat. I've got Epic Tutorials for iPhone, iPad, and iOS. That's the person's name. Epic Tutorials writes, I had to sell both my Nexus 6P and Sony X5 because the Snapdragon chip would overheat badly. 2 minutes of 4K video on the Sony, 8 minutes of 4K on the Nexus before the camera app would shut down. Does the Samsung chip run cooler? And I think we're in a situation where I don't know that your experiences on the Qualcomm chips on the Nexus 6P and the Sony are an indication of what we can do with better power management. So this is one of the reasons why I think LG went with the lower powered chip. So the Sony uses the Qualcomm 810. The 810 had this issue initially where people were it would overheat and would sort of throttle. The performance was actually worse than several like older chips. But LG went with the lower powered chip, the Qualcomm 808. And so I've done huge bursts of 4K video on the G4 and the V10 without any kind of throttling that I could perceive. The phone runs hot and it's going to kill that battery, but it never shuts off the recording. And if you look at like my video reviews, especially for the V10, I'm shooting out in 90-degree, almost 100-degree heat with the screen on max brightness. And the phone handles the recording just fine. It's just that I was constantly charging that battery because it was draining the battery really, really quickly. Now, the flip side of that is I've never had any of those types of throttling problems on the Exynos chip that's in the Samsung phones either. So Samsung's chipset does seem to run a little bit more efficiently than Qualcomm's, and that really does help in a heat management and a power management situation. And then Stephen Ayers also writes, before you end the show, my deepest and most heartfelt condolences on the passing of your family member, Biggelow. The memories and love he gave to you all will never be forgotten. And thank you, Stephen. Like I said, this has been an amazing time in my life and a very sad time in my life. But that little dog held out to make sure that our family would transition into something new. And we'll be forever grateful for that. So it's an amazing an amazing collection of memories that we'll be able to hold on to and to share with our little daughter. We actually, before he passed, we got her a little stuffed Shar Pei, and that dog's name will be named Biggelow. So she'll grow up with a Biggelow, and then she'll get to see some photos of Biggelow and some videos of Biggelow. So we'll make sure that he sticks around until she's old enough to start taking care of her own dog, because she's gonna be a dog girl. She's gonna take care of her own dog. So, folks, I think that's where we actually shut this whole thing down. I got to say thanks so much for watching, for participating, for all the people in the live chat, Gabe and James and Steven and Epic Tutorials. Thank you so much for jumping in the live chat and shooting me some comments and some questions. I really do appreciate you guys, taking this tech journey with me. And as always, I cannot continue producing on this channel without your support. So by hitting the fan funding links on my YouTube channel, by shopping using those Amazon affiliate and sponsored links underneath all of my videos. If you're shopping this holiday season and you take the time to click on my Amazon affiliate link first, it's no additional cost to you, but I really appreciate the effort that you took the time to find one of my links before shopping, because I get a cut of that advertising revenue and it helps keep the lights on here at Some Gadget Guy. And then above and beyond, just by sharing these videos on your favorite social sites like Twitter and Reddit and Facebook and Google Plus and any other social site you might want to participate with, because I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be shooting reviews and shooting tutorials and writing books and producing a podcast if it weren't for the interaction, if it weren't for the people that care about this stuff in the same way that I do. And I know there are a lot of us out there who don't get this kind of commentary anywhere else. We're sort of lone wolves that are looking for more discussions of nuance and more discussions of lifestyle, and aren't interested in just coming in to flame bait, flame wars, like LG's the best, Samsung rules, Apple is stupid, like we don't care about that. What we want to do is push this stuff farther, is use this stuff more and get into the really fine nitty-gritty details on how we experience this stuff. And that's why I still shoot videos and write articles and produce podcasts, because of you guys out there who care. So for every time you bring someone to this channel, another cool person, not another douchebag. We don't need more douchebags on the internet. But every time you bring someone cool to this channel, it just makes my job so much more fun to produce this content. So I can't thank you enough. And that's why I produce this podcast. So, folks, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more rambling vlogs like these. And, folks, I will catch you all on the next podcast. Bam. Hit that thumbs up button. You know you want to.